doing?
Yeah. First off, thank you for coming on to chat with us. We're really excited to speak with you.
Yeah, I'm Gavin, by the way, just so you know.
And I'm Zach. I guess to just kick things off, could you tell everybody a little bit about you and your activism and kind of what you've been up to recently?
Yeah, so my name is Ashley Stevens. You can call me Ash or Ashley. It doesn't really either or. I've been pretty active in politics since really heavily undergraduate school. Once I went into undergrad, because I was, you were part of like student body stuff in high school. At first, to be honest, I started doing that in high school as a way to just not have to go home, to hang out, and you get out of school classes. Like early, I think that's how it started. And then I really started learning more about, I had a really good high school teacher that I kind of go back to that started talking to us about labor and about the history of labor in America, and really believed in the idea of what America could be. So I went to college and I majored in history and political science. I had amazing professors, amazing advisors. I had to stop for a little while due to family issues. I had, my grandmother was diagnosed with lung cancer and Alzheimer's runs in our family. That's when I really started looking at and learning about single payer. I think Dennis Kucinich and Bernie Sanders, I've heard about them for a long time ago when they were doing that. Fortunately for my grandmother, my granddad was in the Air Force, so she was able to get a lot of her health care through the VA. But you get to know a lot of people when you're sitting in those cancer units and the cancer wards, and you hear a lot of stories about people being unable to pay for things. So that was my first brush with, is there anything I can do about it? And then that's when I started looking at, went back to school because I had to pause after she passed away. We were really close and that really affected me. And then I was a little bit older, and then I did really started getting involved on campus and learning about the power of people and Bernie Sanders and Dennis Kucinich. And then I started reading a lot of more works about the Black Panther Party, the things that they did. One of the pillars that they had in their movement was healthcare for all. And then I started reading a lot of their works. I really started reading Ida B. Wells, James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, Angela Davis, one of my favorite people.
Mine too.
Yeah, she's one of my favorite people. I was assigned to read, and this is like all over the place, but this is kind of where it started. Then I had to read the book, The New Jim Crow. And I think I got so much righteous anger to say, wait a minute, so this was a complete setup. And then you start learning more and more, and you start realizing that there is an entire system set up to hurt people. And while there's one system where there's systemic racism, there's also a system to, pretty much capitalism, to really extract labor and extract wealth from working class and poor people. Then I learned more about the history of the labor movement. I learned where rednecks really came from and about how they were fighting back against the coal industry and about what was going on in Appalachia. And I started to learn more about how when people got together, things can change. So I really got involved in politics. At that time, I was still kind of more liberal because Obama was coming on the scene, and I was full force, like, for Obama. I had known a little bit about Dennis Kucinich, but when I knew he couldn't win, Obama was like that person that he really got to me. I really believed in him. The Occupy movement was going on at the same time. He was talking about single payer, and I know he had worked with Bernie in the past, so I was full-throatedly into that. So I really started organizing. I got an internship with Jim Clyburn because I went to the University of South Carolina. So I got an internship there. And when you major in political science there, you have to do an internship, and a lot of people become a page, like for the State House. I had a few family connections where I could be an intern for Jim Clyburn. I did a summer intern in DC. That changes everything. if you ever go to DC or get involved.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? How do you think that changes everything?
That did not make me more conservative. Like when people say, "Oh, when you the older you get, and the more you get exposed to how things are really done, you'll want to compromise more, and you'll want to be more conservative." Yeah. It made me more left.
I found the same to be true.
Yeah, like it did, because I realized that the Conservative Party, and especially if anything, I really wish that the Tea Party had showed more leftists that when you are uncompromising and you say, this is our hard stand, and you have the numbers, they will bend to your will, which is what the Republicans did. They bent to the Tea Party, and they got all of the legislation that they wanted passed. It just lets me know that politics in America, DC is a very dirty game. And the people who have the most power are the people who honestly, one, have the most money, but two, put a lot of pressure on their politicians. And while working people, you and I, all of us, we don't really have like we're not billionaires. We don't have hundreds of millions of dollars. So we can't really influence them. As far as whining and dining them, that's very huge. Lobbying, I became very anti-lobbyist.
Legalized bribery.
Legalized bribery. And there are some smaller lobbies, like the Sunrise Movement could be considered a lobbyist. But I'm talking about the big time.
Corporate lobby, yeah.
Yeah. And I realized, so there's nothing we can do on the bottom, like just talking about it. We need people power. And I started saying, well, maybe if we just start showing up to these people's offices. At that time, Joe Wilson was there. He was, yelling at Obama, you lie and everything. So I said, we can just go to his office. And if enough of us camp out at his office, and if enough of us camp out at our governor's mansion and we don't leave, they have to pay attention to us, which is why later on I did get involved with climate activism, Black Lives Matter locally. I really got involved with teachers. I got an internship, so then I went into like education and like law school, which I thought I was going to do, because I was like, I'm going to change the world and really focus on environmental policies. But I realized I didn't have to go to law school for that. I learned that if we just are uncompromising, and there are a lot of us, and we make our politicians extremely uncomfortable and afraid, things will get done. And hopefully with everything that's been going on with the marching now, with wanting to defund the police, we clearly see that if we just come together and are uncompromising and say, we will not bend to you anymore, you're going to do what we want you to do, or we're not going to support you, then they're going to make changes. Cities all over now are defunding their police, trying to revert more money into education, housing projects, climate change projects. So I really learned throughout my journey, I know that's like all over the place, that my passion and my activism really is for people and what the idea of America could be if we all come together and have a common goal of what's good for everyone, and not compromising, not backing down. Even if we just have two things that we say we're not going to compromise on. You're going to give us this. I feel like Medicare for All was that thing, and it made a lot of the Democratic nominees at first, okay, I support it, and they all jumped on it. As the primary season went on and they were getting more donor money, they stopped supporting it. And you can clearly see in the polling, like their numbers tanked as soon as they backed away from it. And now the new issue is policing, and people are putting heavy pressure on that. So if we just continue to put this pressure and say, either you're going to support this thing or we're not going to support you, they're going to have to at some point bend to us and to our will. And
so
do you think Joe Biden would bend to the people's will?
Absolutely not. He's not. He's not going to. I have so many mixed feelings and emotions when it comes to that. But I'm not going to delude myself or lie to myself or any of my fellow activists or people who truly believe in Medicare for all to sell them a dream. I've been sold a dream. I got played by Obama really hard. That's never going to happen again. I look at a politician's record and their legislative history, and their words only mean as much as their actions that back it up. Joe Biden has no interest in moving left. He doesn't really have to at this point. He did that little commission that they did, like, oh, we're going to do this. They got nothing. We got nothing, like absolutely nothing. Even during a primary where he needs the left to jump on board. And with Trump and the right going full fascist, Joe Biden can't even pretend to lie. He can't even pretend. He looked, is his name Andy or Addie? I don't want to say his name.
Eddie Barkin.
Yeah. He looked him in the eye and was pretty much like, no, I'm not going to do it. He's not budging on climate change, which is odd because I would think even if he was selfish enough to care about his own family, he would say, I have grandchildren, I would want them.
And that the task force report that was recently put out by the quote unquote task forces, it wasn't even like the official platform. It was merely suggestions for Biden to take into consideration. So like,
it didn't even have anything as legalizing marijuana. Like there was nothing. There was no gimmies. I mean, absolutely nothing. I mean, I think that he said that by 2035 they were going to try and be carbon zero, whatever that means.
Yeah, he said, I'm going to try to do this. He's still for fracking. He is very much so against Medicare for all, even when he had his own personal issues with his son and needing to borrow money. Like, he still cannot move left. He's anti-marijuana, which, I mean, he did write the crime bill as his signature thing, and that puts a lot of people in jail, so he can't really.
I wanted to ask you about that specifically. You've tweeted a lot about how, Joe Biden has acted really entitled about, treating the black vote as a monolith when it's the exact same vote that he, incarcerated in mass numbers. And also, if you want to look at his fiscal policy, the bankruptcy legislation that he championed, all the credit card companies that he allowed, to get away with, huge crimes when he was senator of Delaware. I mean, this laundry list of I want to say legislation that was directly harmful, largely over harmful, or I'm struggling to find the words. It affected brown and black communities at a larger rate than it affected white constituents, though they were also many times affected. What do you think about that? And what do you think about his continuation to declare that, like, you're not black if you don't vote for me or support me, that, the black vote is a firewall for him, just how does that make you feel? And how do you respond to that?
My first response is no, you don't own me or my vote. Like, it's not 1820. I'm not owned at all. 1, 2, I'm very much so a leftist. I think I moved further left. Bernie was a compromise for me. I was even left of Bernie on a lot of things. My loyalty and allegiance will always firstly align with the people. That means poor people, working people, underrepresented minorities, brown and black people, sex workers, women, the LGBTQ community, because I believe if you serve the least represented among us, then everybody gets represented. We already have the numbers in that when it comes to things like affirmative action, housing, job sources. My desire, which is not going to happen, would be that so much pressure is being put on Joe Biden that he can't possibly raise, that the Democratic Party would just be forced to replace him. Because at this point, it is what it is, but we can just say we're not going to vote for this man. Joe Biden has caused so much material and active harm to the black community. Like, first when he said, you're not black, I think he really meant that. That wasn't a joke. I don't care how they're trying to spin that. Like, he really does believe, and the Democratic Party really does believe that they own the black vote. And it's an abusive relationship because they're like, well, these Republicans aren't going to do anything for you. And I mean, we're not going to do anything for you either, but we're not going to be as bad as those guys. And then if you take a moment and pause, you realize, oh, you're not as bad as those guys, but you're still actively causing harm. It wasn't the Republicans that wrote the crime bill. That was Joe Biden in conjunction with people like Strom Thurmond in the 80s.
Who he referred to as a good friend of
A
mine.
good friend. He eulogized him at his funeral. His original, that wasn't even the one that got passed, wasn't his first crime bill. His first crime bill was so malicious and it was so racist that
he was pushing Reagan to the right.
He was pushing Reagan to the right. Like the Republicans in the 80s, which Reagan was not a good guy. Like what he did during the AIDS crisis, he was very racist. He, the really Horton ads, he couldn't even get them on board because even they said this is too far. So that lets you know where Joe Biden is. Not only did he push for things like the crime bill that disproportionately and actively targeted Black and brown communities, you have the civil asset forfeiture, which targets Black and brown communities and poor white communities more than anyone else because we don't have as much representation as other people do. He pushed for the bankruptcy bill, which hurts, the student loans. The highest number of people that take student loans are poor people, working class people. Black women are graduating at a higher rate than a lot of other people. But if we come from a disadvantaged background, we're taking more student loans. So it's that does active harm. The Iraq war, the ICE, he has caused active harm to so many communities. DOMA, like even during the AIDS crisis, he wasn't there for the LGBT community. I cannot think of any policy that he pushed, that he wrote, that he championed, that was helpful, because he calls himself Working Class Joe, that has been helpful for working class people. And he for sure hasn't been helpful to the Black. He has caused the type of harm that people like to say that Trump and Republicans want to cause. So they say, oh, well, they want to do this thing. Well, they may want to do that, but you actually did it.
Yeah. Well, and that's especially ironic considering how so many liberals have kind of allowed themselves to fall into this trance of like, oh, Joe Biden is the way out of this. Joe Biden will be our savior. He's honest. He's decent. He's great. He's such a contrast with Trump because, he doesn't tweet stupid things and he doesn't have a brash attitude on camera. Well, sometimes he definitely does, but he's a little bit more polite. And it's just so stupid and dishonest that, they're kind of treating this man like that. Like you've said, has caused so much harm, has no real business being a moral leader for the left in any way, shape, or form. What I'm kind of interested in hearing your perspective on as an activist is, should we really just kind of abandon electoral politics and focus that energy on more activist pursuits, trying to push politicians instead of trying to, elect the right ones or whatever? Because more often than not, it just seems like the progress isn't going to happen that way. Like you said, we've seen cities defunding the police after this activist energy in the streets. Is that what we should be focusing our energy on, in your opinion?
Well, first I want to say the fact that Biden has been allowed to be this person that's kinder, gentler. He's going around calling young women dog-faced pony soldiers.
Flying dog-faced pony soldiers, yeah.
He's saying, listen, fat, and he's getting into people's faces, people who are veterans' faces, telling them, this is what I'm going to... he's yelling at people. He's telling activists who wants to focus on immigration and challenging his legacy and within himself and the Obama's administration on the cages, like they like to say, these kids at the cages, okay, but didn't y'all build those cages?
The most famous picture circulating of the little boy in the cage was actually taken in 2016 during the Obama administration. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't understand how. I think Trump is just this visceral lightning rod, and so many people detest him. So they just channel all that to him, and they want to say that Joe Biden is this nicer, kinder guy, but he's actually telling people that are challenging his policies, that are trying to move him to the left, that are trying to move him to a more inclusive future, to just vote for Trump. Well, we don't want to vote. I don't want to vote for Trump. I'm not going to vote for Trump. I didn't vote for him in 2016. I'm not going to vote for him now. What I want is a party that claims that Black people are their firewall and we're the working class party to work for the working class. Let's say that, oh, we care about the LGBTQ issues. We were there for you before the Republicans to actually show up. So Biden isn't really kind. He isn't nice. This is the first time a presidential candidate that I've known that gets so angry with someone challenging them.
It's really weird.
That says, you're not black, or shut up, fat, or, well, you know what, just vote for Trump. Well, we don't want to vote for Trump. We kind of just want to make this party.
And meanwhile, he doesn't use that language against Trump. It's not like he's out there calling Trump a lying dog-faced soldier.
Because they're all friends. Like, I don't understand why people haven't realized that. But as far as what I think we should do, me personally, I've had to step away from electoral politics for a little while. After I said when the primaries was over, I personally need to channel my energies to something else, because I was getting very stressed out and I was just burned out personally. So what I'm choosing to do right now is to be more active locally, which is why I did start Jog for Good with my cousins, but that's why I started going more into the direct action and mutual aid. So there's several different things you can do as far as direct action. You can protest and you can lobby your city council and you can shut down the streets. You can also make sure that certain bills and laws are put on the voting. So like the state by state voting for marijuana, legalizing marijuana, that is a direct action thing. In Florida, when they say we want to give inmates, former felons who didn't have the right to vote, now they can vote. So those things are direct actions that bring a lot of harm, restorative justice. So I'm really in favor of that. I am in favor of activism and mutual aid, meaning wherever in your local community, maybe you have some community centers that may need some food banks, after school programs that maybe you can volunteer for to do tutoring, especially right now with so many parents and teachers struggling. So me personally, I'm moving much more towards the direct action and the mutual aid, because I see that right now that's working for me. But I don't want to say no one should participate in electoral politics. I think you still need a group of people that are invested and are still working for you. So it would need to be a two-pronged thing. But if you are worn out, if one way or the other, I feel like, well, right now, electoral politics is the best for me, then do that. If you feel that, like me, I'm really burned out, I can't do that. I've been voting since I turned 18. I have not seen where my vote has done anything of help nationally. I can't do that. I just need to just recharge, and I want to really focus as locally as possible. I say do that. We see that direct action gets things done. I'm not like pro-violence in the sense that I don't think we should go around beating each other up, but I really don't care about the destruction of a building.
Well, I think it's interesting. Oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't really care about the destruction of a building that's highly insured when you're shooting people in the leg. Like I've seen those, Chuck Modi just tweeted one out about this young lady in DC. Like she has all these rubber bullets in her leg. It's awful. We see that it works. So I'm like, well, whatever is going to work the quickest to help us, that's what I'm for. So that's why I've been pushing more towards direct action. But I say, yo, you can go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to continue on the point that you made. I think it's kind of ridiculous, but also really telling about the societal values that we've created, that violence against property is almost comparable or talked about in the same kind of league or sentiment, or however you want to put it. It's equated to violence against an actual human being, especially in the context of the protesters. Oh, this person was violently assaulted by a police officer because they broke this piece of glass in a window. You know, this way that those things are equated. Oh, we used, warfare tactics, chemical weapons against these protesters and demonstrated because there was property damage. And the way that we, just equate violence as a response to property damage, I think is really telling about the society that we've created. I just wanted to kind of further.
Yeah, I think and I'm a little bit of a nerd. I am a nerd, and I'm definitely like a history nerd. We have assigned capitalism is ultimately about ownership. And ownership of capital, whether that is people, whether that is property, because you get something from this property, right? So because the ownership of this thing, we've put so much value on that, or value something that is equitable to humans. So normal people would think, no, I don't really care about this Target burning down. It's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They can recoup that. What I care more about is the fact that you're macing children, like 10-year-old kids, and you're not letting people peaceful protest. But we live in such a capitalistic society that so much value is put on property in conjunction with people, because people were once property, that they have equated things to people. So I know why people are like, oh, this is violence because you're this property, and they always try to micro it down to like small businesses and things like that to try to put a connection to you. But these are big businesses. Yeah. I don't care. But you have to think about the psychological effects of how America has used human capital to build itself up, to then once we couldn't have human capital anymore, where do we go from there? And that became into property value. Because you remember when America was first created, who could vote? People who owned property, people who own land, and not people, just white men, because women couldn't vote at that time either. And poor white people white men couldn't vote. It was men who owned property. So the very foundation of America is built in property ownership equating to power. So when we destroy this property, you have this psychological thing like, oh my gosh, you're destroying this power. So then they send the police in, who is not really there to help the community. They're just there to enforce laws and protect property. That's why they're getting so violent towards people, because we have a history of property mattering more, property giving you power. So I think that that's how you can look at, where do we get to the point where a Target or a gas station being destroyed by the people that live there be more important than the actual people. Yeah. And I think that that's how we got to that point, because they equated that with actual power, because that's how you had power.
And it's also really ironic because we've just seen, they claim to care about the small businesses, but they pretty much just let 40% of all small businesses go to the wayside after our failed, bungled response to coronavirus, which is, left over 100,000 people dead and multiple small businesses, closing the door for nothing, because now we're just reopening anyway. And the cases are spiking. So, I mean, people's livelihoods, people's businesses have been destroyed. And no one in power really seems all that concerned about that. Have you seen on a local level in your community, have you seen that impacting everyone as much as we have over here?
Yeah, I have. And when you live close to like the beach, like I do in Virginia, and there are a lot of small businesses that are affected by that, you really started, and then we start hearing the rumblings about who's getting these loans. They're not going to small businesses. They're doing the breakdown of where it's going to. So it's not even going towards the businesses that they claim, like, oh, you're really hurting these small businesses if you do X, Y, and Z. That's not true. That's gaslighting. And one of the things that has shown me the collectivism of Americans coming together is when the shutdown initially started, people were supporting small businesses. We were ordering things online. We were still shopping at their restaurants because we were taking things to go. There was like this thing called Takeout Tuesday that a lot of people were participating in. So we really did try to support each other a lot. Our government, who we pay taxes to, they failed us. And not just the government, because it almost seems like it's just an entity out there, but the people that we elected into power, like Nancy Pelosi and her husband getting, they're talking about, oh, Trump, he got money. Yes, he did. Mitch McConnell's wife got money. Yes, she did. This is awful. And so did Nancy Pelosi. It's not this side is bad, but we tried to give you this. And they do this psychological game. Oh, we tried to give you money and we care about the small businesses. Mitch McConnell, his wife got that money. And then you looking like, oh, Nancy, well, your husband did too. And you guys are 100 millionaires. What did you need that for? And they went
or ice cream.
Yeah, that's where it's going, in that $22,000 fridge, while people are struggling. So I did see how certain people getting bailouts and other people's not getting bailouts affect local communities and smaller businesses. You see it a lot, but that was all a construct to people that were in power. I mean, they weren't even fighting to continue to give us stimulus money. I mean, you had a few people like Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, AOC, Bernie, even Kamala, which I was surprised. I'm not a huge fan of Kamala Harris, but even she was saying we need to give people, you know, at first her plan was awful because she wanted only give $500.
Oh, yeah,
but
I remember
over
that.
time, yeah, it was awful. But over time, even she signed on to one of the bills that were giving people $2,000 like a month, so we can still keep going, but stay home and keep the economy going.
Yeah.
And none of that happened. There isn't much that happened that actually helped people during the shutdown.
Yeah, and it's insane that like Biden is really not even, it doesn't really have much of a plan or isn't really presenting people with anything. It's not like he's really anyone's really going to get anything tangible out of Biden winning. Like, I think it would be so obvious for him to just say, like, yeah, for the duration of this pandemic, I'll institute a $1,000 or $2,000 UBI. At least that would give, you know, struggling people a legitimate, tangible reason to vote for the man, despite his abhorrent record. And it's just like, nope, the Democrats it's just like, we're just going to keep letting senators and Congress people write these bills and then let them get killed. And without ever actually embracing this as part of the platform. It's insane.
Well, they're just playing their role in the corporate consensus, right? Like there's this whole myth of polarization in Washington and that, oh, we're so deeply divided and the Democrats want everything good and the Republicans are bad. When really, I mean, it's just this like game that they're playing where they're, you know, everybody's wearing their costumes and I'm on this side and you're on that side. And really, we're just kind of going to support the capitalist consensus. So I think that's, you know, exactly how this is unfolding here. Ashley, we really want to be respectful of your time and thank you so much for joining us today. We just wanted to ask you, what's the future holds for you? What's the 2020, 2021 look like for Ashley Stevens? What's on your horizons?
So I did build up that initiative with my cousins because we got tired of, we were always like, oh, this person was shot again. Oh, this person was murdered again. Like, what can we do? And then all of us are pretty much work out. We're runners, or my cousin Tara used to play football for like the DC Divas. So we're all pretty much athletically enough inclined. And I said, you know, I live in a pretty mixed neighborhood. I try to be around, I don't like homogenous like cities that really
gentrification
freaks me out because I grew up in a very diverse community and a diverse family with different cultures, different races. So I like differences. And I said, you know, I'm fortunate in the sense that people have seen my face enough when I'm going for a run or I'm jogging. I said, but could you imagine if you just moved to a place and you just happen to be a brown person or a black person or anyone else of color and you're jogging and you just get shot? Like the last one.
Ahmaud Arbery.
Yeah. It's like, I'm literally just jogging. And then that's when it started. And it was like, well, how can we move forward from there? And for me, someone that works in education, I said, you know, I think maybe I know this has been done before, but if we just start locally and start having conversations, difficult conversations to try to figure out where everyone's coming from, because all of us have some sort of bias, all of us have some sort of privilege, and all of us have things that we probably should and could change, and it starts with conversations. So I said maybe we should start doing something with difficult conversations. So the Jog for Good came out of that. So we're going to be working on that for the rest of the year. Me personally, I am going to continue to annoy my city council to get them to defund the police and, you know, fund community centers, housing projects, the arts, teachers. I even said, okay, so if the federal government is going to give us another stimulus, right? They don't want to do that, which would literally be the easiest way to get Biden elected because the Dems control the House. So if they pushed another bill that was going to give people money, even $1,000 a month for the rest of the year, and Nancy pushed it, and Biden said, yes, this is what I wanted them to do, it wouldn't even be an issue. They would say, oh, well, at least we can see them working. They have power right now. They're not even using that. So what I said was, okay, well, now that we know that our state and city governments are giving, like in New York, $6 billion towards the police, then how much money are our other cities doing? And why don't we have a stimulus per city then, because we want to talk about the minimum wage and it has to be different because each city and each, state is different. We can't pay people in cost of living in Virginia. They like to say, well, depending if you're close to DC, it's expensive, but like the cost of living in Virginia isn't as expensive as the cost of living in California. Well, okay. Well, if you want to do that, we can play this game. We're going to use the money that we will be getting in California, that billions of dollars. And how about we take that and send stimulus checks to people? Why don't we take that and do a moratorium on rent and mortgages? And why don't we take this money that we have, these agricultural bills, and start working with small farms to get people food? So another thing I'm going to do is continue to go to my city council and start talking to people, have conversations with my neighbors about that, because that's another way to go around it. If the federal government isn't doing it, then our state governors and our local city councils, they can. So I'm going to work on pushing that angle, because when I found out New York, $6 billion to the police.
And Bill de Blasio was trying to pawn it off as if it was a cut. He was like, oh, we cut $1 billion from the police fund. And really what they're doing is they're just pushing off hiring until October.
Yeah, and I don't think people realize how much $1 billion is. And it's like, wait, you don't even need $1 billion. Y'all have 6? Okay, why in the world is anyone in New York City worried about bad transit systems or clean water or not?
Not only that, it just broke that 1 out of every 4 people in New York City haven't paid rent since March, and they're facing the biggest eviction crisis in U.S. history.
Yes, that could be fixed. Maybe cut the police, like the funding. And so I'm just like, you know what? We need to, and I did say it kind of flippantly, but I really meant it. Cut them the same way you've been cutting education budgets, housing budgets, green space budgets, budgets for veteran affairs is getting cut. They're cut the police budgets the same way, and just give us, they can survive the same way that teacher pay cuts have survived, that arts pay cuts have survived, and just revert that money back to the people. So I'm going to be working with my local community on that. And I'm really trying to get people to understand that it is not government handout. It is not government money. It is your tax dollars. You literally pay taxes on everything. Every time even children, you buy some candy, you pay taxes on it. You buy a new pair of shoes, you have a tax on that. We have to get our cars. Some states do this where you have to get your car, where you have to get it checked every year for like the emissions thing. There's a charge for that. And then you still have to pay property tax on that, even though you already paid taxes, sales tax when you bought this car. So it's not government money. It is your money, and it needs to be reverted back to the people. So that's one thing that I'm going to be doing in my local community to try to get programs to work on things like the eviction crisis that's going on and homelessness. Maybe try to start community gardens, because people are hungry, and it's ridiculous that we're the richest country in this world and people are going hungry. And the other thing is personal for me, is just try to maintain my mental health and just make it through 2020. And if you just are living at the end of the year and that's the best you did, and like, oh, all I did was survive. Well, you know what? A lot of people didn't. So congratulations. Like, just surviving to the end of the year. I don't know.
A hell of a ride.
It's one hell of a ride. It's only July.
I know.
I would encourage people to keep fighting, keep pushing. I don't think there's any way to push Joe Biden, but we must push the Democratic Party. The only way we can push them is to refuse to vote for them. And especially if I'm not telling people who to vote for, I am saying to be strategic with your voting, and voting is transactional and you should get something for it. And if you don't see yourself getting something for that, you need to treat it as you would anything else. You wouldn't go to the store and buy something and say, well, you know, we're going to give you the yarn because we're just not going to make these pants for you. You wouldn't continue to shop at that store. I mean, I didn't want to break it down like that, but you should be getting something. Votes are transactional. Communities are suffering. And I always try to make sure that people know that, yes, we do need to work on race relations, but we are in a much better place now than what we were before. I've seen it. I know it's easy to say because of Trump, like it's so bad, but we're having conversations we never would have had before. We're having real honest and open conversations about race and systemic racism. We're having open and honest communication in conversations about people in the LGBT community, about our indigenous brothers and sisters, our natives here. We're having conversations out in the open, and we really are coming together. So I would like to continue to keep doing that and learning more about police abolition, learning more about breaking down this capitalistic system. I'm not a capitalist at all. I'm just going to put that out there. I've said that before, but I'm really just not. I don't see where it's been helpful overall to people at the bottom, the 98%. So I want to keep learning more about that, building relationships with people, learning more from people that are disadvantaged from me, because I do have a privilege. I grew up in a very close family. I'm not to the point where I'm worried about eviction or not having somewhere to stay. So that's a privilege. I'm straight. I don't have to worry about, am I going to be hated because of who I love? I grew up in a Christian family. There are churches every 2 blocks in the South if you want to go to a Christian church. So I really want to use whatever privilege I have to help other people. I went to college and I work at a university. There are people who don't have access to certain things. So how can I help those people? So I really want to continue to work for people that are just like me, and then people who are in different situations that might need help, may need a voice. Like, how can I help you? I think if we did that more, we'd realize that we're more alike than we are different.
Absolutely. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us, and we look forward to seeing the work that you do in the future.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much,
no
Ashley.
problem. Thanks.
I also just wanted to say, huge fans of your Twitter content. Keep it up.
Oh, thanks. Sometimes I think I get fussed at because I'm not doing Jog for Good by myself. So I'm like, should I say this? This might hurt someone else, or like somebody in my family. Like, well, I get what you're saying, but maybe you could be a little bit nicer, and I just get angry, and I'm just like no, F you. We need to take care of each other. Like, people can't eat. Like, F you. Why are people homeless? Like,
yeah. We need that energy on the left. We need more of that attack dog. Like, no prisoners, take no shit. Let's go.
I'm not doing it. I'm not bending anymore. And I would encourage all the leftists, the real leftists, to say, no, we're not bending anymore. You're going to give us something. Medicare for all, defunding the police, make sure people have houses. I don't know, but you're going to give me something, and I'm not bending at all.
That should be the message, yeah. Give us
don't
something.
bend the knee.
Yeah. Crazy that needs to be said, but yeah, give us something.
Don't bend the knee.
Thanks so much, Ashley.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, anytime.
Have a good one.
Y'all have a great one.